My pops died a few months ago, and it took quite the toll on my mom. I figured that the best way for her to cope with things, and me too if I'm being honest, was for me to move back home. It just seemed like the most prudent move. My job bussing tables out west had landed me very few opportunities in the entertainment industry. You may have seen me in a commercial once, but that's doubtful. Yep, things were falling apart around me. You see, he was the guy I looked up to my whole life. He was your run-of-the-mill, beer-drinking, barbecue-cooking, camcording guy. He was Dad. When I showed up at the house and was greeted by my mom, I saw it hadn't changed a bit since I'd left. There was still the cabinet with my mom's glass ornaments and figurines in the kitchen. He'd muse and call those things dust collectors. He wasn't wrong. After taking my mom out on the town with the last few bucks I had, she filled me in on the details of the funeral. I meant to be there, I said. I know, honey. She made eye contact with me over her steak. You wouldn't want you beating yourself up over something like that, though. You know that. I shrugged. Hey. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. It's all right. I offered her a reassuring smile. It was reciprocated. Anyway, how have things been without him? Pretty good. She pulled her hand away and began digging into the steak, avoiding my eyes. Eat up before it's cold. It was hard for her to talk about. Of course, I've never been as close to anyone as they were to one another. We spent the rest of my first night in the house watching TV in spells of silence. After some time, she retired to her bedroom. I stayed up watching some Law & Order rerun, only half paying attention from behind my phone. Once I'd had enough, I shut the TV off and started down the hallway to the bedroom I slept in as a child. I'd be lying if I said that weren't a bit surreal. I'd need a bigger bed. I stopped at the threshold of my bedroom and stared down the dark hallway. At the end of it was the shut door of his man cave. I briefly wondered if anyone had set foot in there since his death. If I knew my mom, that was a big negative. Maybe I felt bad for missing the funeral. Or missing the past couple years of his life. Or maybe I just wanted to feel close to him one more time. I shut the door of the man cave behind me and scanned the dark room. I was immediately met by a small table with a computer and a Newton's cradle. On the far wall, there was a flat screen with several gizmos and electronics resting on a short bookcase beneath it. Between these two spaces was a makeshift workbench, a half-painted birdhouse resting atop it that would be stuck in time like that forever. I went to the high shelf of books on the wall above the small table and ran my index finger along the spines of the books there. Mostly how-to or DIY stuff. As I moved towards the TV, my foot caught along some unseen object, and I stumbled forward into the wall beside the low bookshelf. My shoulder met the drywall, and I went cleanly through the wall. Where there should have been a sheet of insulation or a stud, there was just open black space. I scrambled from the open hole in the wall and looked around for the thing I tripped on. A stray hammer. I turned my attention back to the hole and approached it carefully, wrapping my fingers around the broken drywall. It was ice cold. I felt around in the space there and felt a small wooden box. I removed it into my lap and examined it in the dark room. There were strange impressions all over it that I could feel with the tips of my fingers. I waited in the dark by myself with the wooden box in my lap, listening for the sound of my mother coming out of her bedroom. Honestly, I'm surprised she didn't. After calling myself silly, I crossed the room on my knees and flipped the light on. I took up in the chair at the small table and placed the wooden box there. It looked like it was handcrafted, rudimentary, but tasteful with bronze hinges. I flipped the thing open, and inside were videotapes. 3 of them. Plain VHS tapes with white tape labels. 1, 2, 3. I lifted the first one from the box and crossed the room to the flat screen. After admonishing myself for the hole in the wall, I scanned the low bookshelf to see if there was a VCR. And eureka! There it was. I hunkered down and pushed the tape in, and turned on the TV. Once I'd properly fought with the remote to find which channel it needed to be on, the screen came alive in all its gritty glory. At first, there was nothing. Just black. But there was the sound of someone shuffling around with the camera. Heavy breathing. Whoever was filming it was having a really tough time, it seemed. Then the picture came into focus. It was green. No. It was pointed out of a window, through the branches of a tree. I froze. That was the backyard I grew up in. There, standing at the edge of the back lawn, was an unmoving figure with a wide-brimmed hat, painted as hardly more than a black smudge. Through the reflection of the window, I caught my dad's face, mustache and all. He was young, but it was difficult to surmise how young, given the fact that I was looking at his face through an old tape and a reflection on a window. One thing I could make out was that he was terrified. I could sympathize. I was too. It was obvious what he was doing. He was attempting to get a good shot of the figure at the edge of the lawn. It stood there menacingly, almost like it wasn't even a person. In fact, if not for the hat, I might have chalked it up to my dad's paranoia. But he saw it. I saw it too. He shifted towards the window, and it was obvious that with the old camcorder, it was hard for him to lift the window and keep the camera appropriately angled. The window was opened off screen, and he whipped the camera back around to peer out the window. The figure was gone. My whole body tensed. I was waiting for it. Come on. This is the part of the horror movies where I jump, and my soda pop flies into the air, and my date runs out of the movie theater, promising to never call me again. He scanned the yard with the camera, but the figure was gone. The screen fizzed out for a moment before a new picture came on. It was a playground. My dad was filming me. I couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 at the time. I dangled upside down with my knees crooked around a bar. My shirt flipped up to expose my wee tummy. He pivoted the camcorder to get a quick shot of my mom. Long, black hair, so unlike the salted mane she had these days. She grinned at him. Then, shot a glance to make sure I wasn't looking, and put up her middle finger. They both laughed. He turned the camera back on me, and the screen came full stop with just a hint of a flinch. I heard him mutter something under his breath. I was standing there, perhaps 10 or 15 yards away. Standing alongside me was that same black figure with the wide-brimmed hat. It was closer than it had been the last time. Much closer. My mouth went dry. The camera was shaking. I could feel the fear of my father coming through that goddamn screen. The figure had snow-white eyes. That was the only color coming off of it. 5 or 6-year-old me was holding hands with it and waving at the camera. The thing lumbered nearly 3 feet over me. The camera shut off. I stood there in my dad's man cave, waiting for the screen to do something, but I knew it was done. I turned my gaze to the other 2 tapes, still nestled in the open wooden box on the small table. There they were, waiting for me. I moved to the VCR to remove the first tape and replaced it with the other one. Then my eye caught something. Resting on the shelf below the VCR was the camcorder. It couldn't have been the same one, could it? I lifted the ancient piece of outdated crap and pressed the on button. I waited for the thing to come on, wondering if the battery was dead. With the thing in front of my face, I turned to look at the door leading out of the room, making pretend like maybe I was my dad. I pressed my face to the eyepiece and gasped for air. I couldn't move or scream. Standing in the corner of the room, blocking the door, was the figure. No more than perhaps 7 feet away. It did nothing. It simply stood there, looking directly at me with those piercing snow-white eyes. Although it did not move, I could sense that it wanted to propel forward and end me, like how I could feel the fear coming off my dad through the videotape. I could too feel the hatred coming off of that thing. I pulled the camera from my face and looked at the spot it should have been standing. Nothing but open space. I looked through the eyepiece again, and there it was. I was shaking. I shut the camera off and left the room, feeling as though there was something just outside my periphery watching me as I opened the door and pattered into the hall. I found a hidden stash of spirits my mom liked to keep in case of company, and broke the seal on a bottle of vodka. I drank it till I felt heady. Just enough so I could make believe that what I'd seen wasn't so. But I knew it was. You got into the liquor, huh? I blinked my eyes open. My mother was standing over me with a half-empty bottle of vodka in an outstretched hand, pinched between her forefinger and thumb. Rolling forward to put my feet on the floor, I was hit with a dizzy spell, and the tender spot behind my eyes soured at the light coming in through the window of my bedroom. Sorry, Mom, I grumbled. To be entirely honest with you, whoever is reading this, I never intended to drink that much. She shook her head and laughed. Reminds me of when I had to wake you up for school when you were little. She paused. You never smelled like that when you were little, though. Phew. She wafted a flat palm before her nose to cut the fumes coming off my breath. I stood and wobbled on my feet. She reached out to steady me. Go take a shower. Breakfast will be in the kitchen. Thanks. As I let the water rush down my back, I stared at the strange, unknown brown stain in the base of the old shower, wondering exactly when it had showed up. But I wasn't really thinking about that at all. That's what I wanted to think about. I wanted the world to make sense. I wanted things to be normal. Or at least as normal as things can be for a guy who's moved back in with his mom after his dad's death. That'd be nice. But that wasn't the reality of the situation. My mind kept going back to the tapes. And back to the camcorder. The black figure I'd seen in that footage was something else. I'll say that much. On top of the thing existing, my dad apparently knew of its existence. He knew that it was hanging around our family. Now, I did too. I didn't want to. Was the thing watching me as I stood there in the shower? In a fit, I scrubbed my face, and rinsed it so quickly that I wouldn't be left with my eyes closed for longer than a millisecond. I was jumpy. As I stepped from the bathroom to the hall, I looked down at the closed door there. The door to my dad's man cave. I briefly wondered if she'd checked on the room since I'd left it. After breakfast, my mom made a run to the store, and I was left in the house alone. I flipped through a few of the Harlequin romance novels my mom kept by her chair in the living room, stared out the windows, played on my phone, but still I came back to that goddamn room. And there the camcorder sat. Just where I'd left it. And there were the tapes, too. I was only mildly relieved that my mother hadn't checked in on the room. Did she know about the figure? Had they spoken about it? If you would have asked me if I thought there were any secrets between my mom and dad, I would have said no. But this cast everything in a different light. In the daylight, things felt less spooky. But as I moved by the camcorder to look out the window into the backyard, I could sense that there was something off with the air around the old contraption. It was ice cold. Not quite right. I tossed a throw blanket over it so that I would not have to look at it. Then I went about shifting the low bookcase so that it would cover the hole I'd made the night prior in the wall. I stared out the window for a moment, out at the edge of the lawn, willing the thing to show itself. It did not. I knew what I would have to do if I wanted to see the thing again. But what if I lifted the lens and it was standing directly in front of me? What then? Do we shake hands and introduce ourselves? Unlikely. The hatred coming off of that thing was too much. It wanted me dead, and it was watching me all the time. My eyes then scanned the room. Nothing. Of course there was nothing. Duh. I was making this all up. I must have been. My gaze came to rest on the wooden box with the other 2 VHS tapes inside. It was real. I went to the box and removed the second tape before my brain could even process what was happening. Ejecting the first tape, I slammed the next one in and took a step back from the TV as I turned it on. Fuck this. The sound of my own foot tapping against the hardwood floor only served to drive me up a wall, so I began chewing on the skin alongside my fingernails. I waited for the black screen to show me anything, but all I could make out was a sound. Heavy breathing. Like someone was having a hard time of it. Then it dawned on me. The reason the screen looked so black was because it was nighttime wherever my dad was filming. The camera was shaking like he was moving through rough terrain. Through splashes of a flashlight, I could make out a forest. I could just make out the sound of my dad's footsteps over leaves and rocks. The ambient noise of insects was all around. I squinted hard, hoping to catch a glimpse of anything resembling the figure from the first tape. "Fuck," said my dad as he stumbled over something that I wasn't able to make out. Hearing his voice like that, well, it really caught me off guard. But this was followed by something else. Something inhuman. It was as though something was speaking with the mouth of a human for the first time, or working the muscles that moved the jawbones with strings attached to their fingers. This is the image that zapped into my mind as I heard the words, "Come back. You left me. Come back." It felt like the words were coming from around me, not the TV. My father's breathing kicked into high gear. It's a strange thing hearing whimpers escape from the man you remember as being an invincible Superman. The screen fizzed for a moment before a stark contrast in colors. Bright, vibrant greens. He was filming me and my mom. We were camping. I remember this trip fairly well because I was 10 or 11. My mom hunkered over the rocks gathered in a circle, attempting to start a fire. There was a slow close-up of her butt for several excruciating seconds. Thanks for that one, Dad, really. The camera swung around and caught that fucking figure. It was standing just at the edge of our camp. It was a yard behind me as I cheered for my dear old dad with my hands in my pockets. The screen went to static. I was certain the tape was through and moved to eject it, ready to push the third one in. But then it clicked on again. I dropped the plastic tape, and didn't even hear the sound of the rectangle striking the floor. The figure's face filled the frame of the screen. I would have thought the TV was possessed if not for the faintest tape flicker. Its white eyes stared straight through me. It burned. Looking directly into its eyes like that made me nauseous. Though it was shadowed, up close I could make out the faintest features of a woman, just beyond the black shadows consuming her face. There were no lips. No expression beyond those plain eyes. I jumped to slap the VCR off. The screen blinked into absolute blackness. I stared into it, almost wishing the thing would reappear outside the confines of the camera world. My jaw tensed, just as I was certain that it might actually do such a thing. I heard the sound of tires in the driveway, and scrambled out of the room. In 1987, I helped my friends drown a girl. The man on the TV screen sighed. She would have told the police. It sounded like he was trying to convince himself of it. I just don't get why Mike had to film what they did to her. He shook his head. I glanced over at my mom. She was holding her mouth, eyes wide, awestruck. The tape flickered, and when the picture cleared, the man on screen wiped at his eyes and continued. I don't know what was going on. At first I thought maybe we didn't kill her and she was following me. There was a pause in my father's speech as he cleared his throat, wiping around his eyes. But we took turns holding her head under. She's gone. So whatever's following me is something she left behind. She hangs around my son. That scares me more than anything, Lauren. As my mom's name left his mouth, I shot a look at her. She was crying. If you ended up finding this, I want you to know. I'm sorry. He wiped his eyes. He was crying all the way. This was before I met you. I'm just... The screen blacked out for a few seconds before coming back on. My dad was still there, filming himself in his man cave, sitting at the table. Only now there was an addition to the picture. The figure stood next to him. He continued to speak directly to the camera, unable to see the tall black woman there. It didn't matter what he said. The audio was gone. His lips moved, but nothing came out. My mother got off the couch and moved to shut off the VCR I'd moved into the living room. This isn't real. You know that, don't you? The screen went black. I didn't say anything, but my face must have given me away. It's not true, she said. Holding the tape in both her hands, I could hear her squeezing against the hard plastic. She was shaking. I was certain she'd snap the damn thing in half if she were given the opportunity. I wanted to see what was on the rest of it. I rose from my seat and went to her, pulling her into a brisk hug before putting my hands on her shoulders. Of course it's not, Mom. I know that. Her face softened, and she offered a tender smile before nodding. I need a coffee. She moved to the kitchen without ever bringing up the fact that I'd taken the tape out of her hands. As she left the room, I moved to my dad's man cave. He's still my dad. I just want to know why he'd be a participant in something so terrible. My knee-jerk reaction is to defend him, but I won't do that. I put the tape in the box, deciding to finish it when my mom wasn't around. I can't say exactly how it was that the camcorder ended up in my hands, but it did. And I was looking through it as I wandered down the hallway, hoping the figure would show itself. Perhaps I could confront the thing. I don't know what I was thinking. Stupid as it may have been, as I walked down the hall towards the kitchen, I listened hard for anything that I might be able to make out, because there surely wasn't anything showing up on camera. I rounded the corner into the kitchen and dropped the thing, surprised at what I'd found there. It landed on my foot and I kicked it away. Resting with her back against the lower cabinets, my mom looked up through watery eyes. Blood was everywhere. It came from both her arms like thin ribbon strands, pooling more with every heart pulse. Sitting in her lap was a knife. Even as I rushed to her, slipping in her blood, I knew she was going to die. There was no way someone could lose that much blood and keep going. I was blubbering with my phone in one hand, and my other clasped over the open gash on her left arm. I don't remember what I said to the operator, but I know that look on my mom's face. It's one that will forever be burned into my retinas. It started as delirious peace and ended in nothing. Death is weird like that, I guess. When I got back to the house, it was dark. It felt like an infinite space, hollowed out. I broke down in the kitchen when I saw the spot she'd been in. I cleaned the blood and threw out the knife. Then I threw out the matching ones too. Something told me the thing in the tapes wanted me to find the secret stash in the wall. It wanted this. My clothes were next. I almost considered putting them in the wash, but gave up on them. The camcorder was exactly where I'd left it, sitting there in the threshold of the kitchen. I lifted it. The battery was dead. I'd left it on. I knew what came next. It wasn't me that moved through the house and took the VHS tape. It was someone else. Or so it felt that way. I pushed the tape in and the TV came alive again with my father speaking to the camera and no noise. Standing in the living room where I'd stood next to her early in the day. If nothing else comes of it, I was going to figure out what was going on with my dad and that figure. The screen went black. Again. A noise came from the VCR, and I momentarily thought that maybe I'd seen all the tape had to offer. But no. It came on, and there was that face, cloaked in shadow. Those fire-white eyes were as big as golf balls, with how close she was to the camera lens. "Why?" I asked. No response came from the TV, of course. Nothing would come from the TV. It's not like I could speak to it. She was beyond my words. In another place. Then I filled the screen. I was a teenager, and I was in swim trunks. We were at a pool as my dad angled the camera all around at the people there. Laid out on one of the lounge chairs was my mom. She waved. I cried. My dad wavered the camera back towards me as I cannonballed into the pool. A long time passed and I did not resurface. I remember this. I'd gone lightheaded and couldn't resurface. I nearly drowned that day. My mother screamed, and it came through in the tape so crystal clear that it felt she was near me. Dad shuffled towards the pool and looked into the water. There I was, blurry and furiously kicking at the bottom of the pool. There was the figure, too. Its crisp outline, even beneath the water, was unsettling. It was holding on to my leg. I was kicking at it. I don't remember this part. Just as my body began to limp, the camera shut off. After going unconscious at the bottom of the pool, I awoke on the hard concrete, lining the body of water with my parents leaning over me. Dad was drenched. He dove in and saved me. That's what I remember, but seeing myself held down there on the video made my skin crawl. It felt as though the thing was standing directly beside me as the screen went black. The VCR clicked mechanically. That was all there was to be seen. I moved through the house with my video camera, looking all around the place, wondering if I'd see the thing. It never did appear on video like that, and I've not seen it since. But sometimes I have nightmares, where there's this great big figure holding me down, watching me drown, with its great big eyes full of happiness. It's as real as anything else seems till I wake up, covered in sweat. Or what could possibly be water I've summoned from my dreams. Become a channel member today for early access, bonus videos, and special emojis only available to members. Check out the description below or click the join button for more info. If you'd like another way to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/JordanGrupeHorror. As a patron, you'll get access to bonus videos and content. You'll be credited at the end of every video going forward, and if you decide to stay for 3 months, I'll name a character after you which will be featured in a Hollow's End story. Links to join the Patreon are in the description. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help the channel continue to grow. And see you again next time at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you have a great night.